Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War, and we made it to Antietam. Antietam, as some people would say, and then burp right in my intro, so awesome. Yeah. Bloodiest day of the battle ever of this war. Actually, the bloodiest day in American history. Most blood shed on American soil ever in one single day.
Yeah, a lot.
Well, documented, I guess. I'm sure there was a lot of Indian stuff going on before the white man got here, you know?
Right.
So, Battle of Antietam. Robert E. Lee's marching his forces into Maryland. He's about ready to gear up to attack old Washington. He says, I want to end this shit.
Yep.
It's fought on September 17th between, obviously, Lee's Army of the Northern Virginia and McClellan's back in charge of the Army of the Potomac. It's also known as the Battle of Sharpsburg for you Confederales down there. Near Sharpsburg, Maryland, and Antietam Creek, part of the Maryland campaign. It was the first field army level engagement in the Eastern Theater of the war. Remains the bloodiest day in American history, with a combined tally of 22,717 dead, wounded, or missing.
Dang.
Crazy.
That is crazy. Where Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, about 55,000 men, entered the state of Maryland on the 3rd of September, 1862. Following their victory at Second Bull Run on the 30th of August. Emboldened by success, the Confederate leadership intended to take the war into enemy territory. Lee was adamant on this.
He's like, I'm tired of retreating back to Richmond. Let's fucking take the battle to them.
He's like, Stonewall, do you think you could be ready this time?
Right, like, keep the biscuits out of your mouth there, buddy.
Lee's invasion of Maryland was intended to run simultaneously with an invasion of Kentucky by the armies of Braxton Bragg and Edmund Kirby Smith.
Yep.
It was also necessary for logistical reasons, as Northern Virginia's farms had been stripped bare of food.
I'm sure there were. That's all the war's been.
Based on events such as the Baltimore riots in the spring of 1861 and the fact that President Lincoln had to pass through the city in disguise en route to his inauguration, Confederate leaders assumed that Maryland would become the Confederate forces warmly.
Man, Baltimore was a nasty place even in 1861, huh?
You ain't kidding. They sang the tune, Maryland, My Maryland, as they marched. But by the fall of 1862, pro-Union sentiment was winning out, especially in the western parts of the state, which is where Baltimore's at.
Right. Civilians generally hid inside their houses as Lee's army passed through their towns or watched in cold silence while the Army of the Potomac was cheered and encouraged.
Wow.
Some Confederate politicians, including President Jefferson Davis, believed that the prospect of foreign recognition would increase if the Confederacy won a military victory on Union soil. They're like, we need the support of the French and the British. Such a victory might gain recognition and financial support from the UK and France, yeah. Right. Although there is no evidence that Lee thought the Confederacy should base its military plans on this possibility. I'm sure it didn't hurt.
All right.
While McClellan's 87,000-man Army of the Potomac was moving to intercept Lee, 2 Union soldiers, Corporal Barton W. Mitchell and First Sergeant John M. Bloss of the 27th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, discovered a mislaid copy of Lee's detailed battle plans, which was Special Order 191.
Uh-oh.
It was wrapped around 3 cigars. The order indicated that Lee had divided his army in dispersed portions geographically, one to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and Hagerstown, Maryland.
Oh, geez.
Thus making each subject to isolation and defeat if McClellan could move quickly enough. But do you fucking think he did?
Oh, wow. Well, McClellan waited about 18 hours before deciding to take advantage of this intelligence.
This dude.
Thus squandering an opportunity to defeat Lee decisively. There were 2 significant engagements in the Maryland campaign prior to the major battle of Antietam. Major General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson's capture of Harper's Ferry and McClellan's assault through the Blue Ridge Mountains in the Battle of South Mountain.
Yep.
The former was significant because of a large portion of Lee's army was absent from the start of the Battle of Antietam, attending to the surrender of the Union garrison. The latter because stout Confederate defenses at 2 passes through the mountains delayed McClellan's advance, enough for Lee to concentrate the remainder of his army at Sharpsburg. McClellan delaying. Delaying McClellan.
So Stonewall, remember? They had to call him. They had to rush over there from Harper's Ferry. So.
Idiots.
We got Major General, obviously, McClellan, his Army of the Potomac, bolstered by units absorbed from John Pope's Army of Virginia, including included 6 infantry corps. The 1st Corps under Major General Joseph Hooker consisted of the divisions of Brigadier General Abner Doubleday, Brigadier General James B. Ricketts, Brigadier General George G. Meade.
Hey, look at that.
2nd Corps under Major General Edwin V. Sumner consisted of Major General Israel B. Richardson, Major General John Sedgwick, Brigadier General William French. Then we got the 5th Corps under Major General Fitz John Porter, consisting of the divisions of Major General George Morrell, Brigadier General George Sykes, Brigadier General Andrew A. Humphreys, and the 6th Corps under Major General William B. Franklin consisted of divisions of Major General Henry Slocum, Major General William F. Baldy Smith, a division from the 4th Corps under Major General Darius N. Couch. Got the 9th Corps under Major General Ambrose Burnside.
Hey, in Burnside.
But Brigadier General Jacob Cox exercised operational command during the battle for some reason, and it consisted of the divisions of Brigadier General Orlando B. Wilcox, Samuel D. Sturgis, Isaac P. Rodman. We have the Kanawha Division under Colonel Eliakim P. Scammon. He'd be scamming.
Right.
The 12th Corps under Major General Joseph K. Mansfield, which consisted of Brigadier General Alpheus S. Williams and Brigadier General George S. Green. Plus, we had a cavalry division of Brigadier General Alfred Pleasanton, consisting of the brigades of Major Charles J. Whiting and Colonels John Farnsworth, Richard Rush, Andrew McReynolds, and Benjamin Davis.
Well, look at that shit.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. General Lee, Northern Virginia Army, organized 2 large infantry wings. Major General James Longstreet, right wing, or command, consisted of the following divisions: Major General Lafayette McLaws, Major General Richard Anderson, Major General David Jones, Brigadier General John G. Walker, Brigadier General John Bell Hood, Independent Brigade under Brigadier General Nathan G. Shanks Evans. Major General Stonewall Jackson was the left wing, or the command, consisted of the following divisions: Brigadier General Alexander Lawtons, Major General A.P. Hill, Brigadier General John R. Jones, Major General D.H. Hill.
The usuals for him.
The remaining units were the Cavalry Division under Major General Jeb Stewart and the Reserve Artillery commanded by Brigadier General William N. Pendleton. Jackson's left wing was organized with artillery attached to each division, in contrast to Longstreet's right wing, which reserved its artillery at the corps level.
All right, good for them.
Right, see?
Well, near the town of Sharpsburg, Lee deployed his available forces behind Antietam Creek along a low ridge started on September 15th. While it was an effective defensive position, it was not an impregnable one.
Oh.
The terrain provided excellent cover for infantrymen with rail and stone fences, outcroppings of limestone, little hollows, and swales. The creek to the front was only a minor barrier ranging from 6 to 100 feet in width. It was fordable in places and crossed by 3 stone bridges, each a mile apart.
Okay.
It was also a precarious position because the Confederate rear was blocked by the Potomac River and only a single crossing point was Bottler's Ford at Shepherdstown and was nearby. That was nearby should a retreat be necessary.
Okay,
So they could end up bottlenecking at that if they have to retreat so quick.
Right.
The fort at Williamsport, Maryland was 10 miles northwest from Sharpsburg and had been used by Jackson in his march to Harper's Ferry. The disposition of Union forces during the battle made it impractical to consider retreating in that direction.
Okay.
September 15th, the force under Lee's immediate command consisted of no more than 18,000 men, only a third of the size of the Federal Army.
Ooh-wee.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't worry, there's backup coming.
All right. The first 2 Union divisions arrived on the afternoon of 15th September, and the bulk of the remainder of the Army late that evening. Although an immediate Union attack on the morning of September 16th would have had an overwhelming advantage in numbers, McClellan's trademark caution and his belief that Lee had as many as 100,000 men at Sharpsburg caused him to delay his attack for a day. This gave the Confederates more time to prepare defensive positions, allowed Longstreet's corps to arrive from Hagerstown, and Jackson's corps, minus A.P. Hill's division, to arrive from Harper's Ferry. Jackson defended the left, which is the northern flank, anchored on the Potomac. Longstreet, the right, which is the southern flank, which is anchored on the Antietam, a line that was about 4 miles long. As the battle progressed and Lee shifted units, these corps' boundaries overlapped considerably. Of course.
McClellan's
he could have easily took
What would make him think he has 100,000 men?
So stupid.
It's like, where was our reconnaissance here?
Right.
On the evening of the 16th, McClellan ordered Hooker's 1st Corps to cross Antietam Creek and probe the enemy positions. Okay. Meade's division cautiously attacked Hood's troops near the East Woods. After darkness fell, artillery fire continued as McClellan positioned his troops for the next day's fighting. McClellan's plan was to overwhelm the enemy's left flank. He arrived at this decision because of the configuration of bridges over Antietam. The lower bridge was dominated by Confederate positions on the bluffs overlooking it. The middle bridge was subject to artillery fire from the heights near Sharpsburg, but the upper bridge was 2 miles east of the Confederate guns and could be crossed safely.
Oh, okay. All right. McClellan planned to commit more than half of his army to the assault, starting with 2 corps, supported by a third. And if necessary, he's going to bring in a fourth.
Yeah.
He intended to launch a simultaneous diversionary attack against the Confederate right with a 5th Corps. And he was prepared to strike the center with his reserves if either attack succeeded, which would, I guess.
I would assume. Why would you not be prepared to do that?
The skirmish in the East Woods served to signal McClellan's intentions to Lee, who prepared his defenses accordingly. He shifted men to his left flank and sent urgent messages to his 2 commanders, who had not yet arrived on the battlefield. Lafayette McLaws with 2 divisions and A.P. Hill with 1.
He's like, get here now.
Now, boys.
McClellan's plans were ill-coordinated and were executed poorly, though.
I'm sure they were.
He issued to each of his subordinate commanders only the orders for his own corps, not general orders describing the entire battle plan.
Come on.
Right, how did you need to know what other people are doing.
Right.
The terrain of the battlefield made it difficult for those commanders to monitor events outside of their sectors, obviously. Moreover, McClellan's headquarters were more than a mile in the rear, because that's what he likes to do. And this made it difficult for him to control the separate corps.
This guy's a moron.
This is why the battle progressed the next day as essentially 3 separate, mostly uncoordinated battles. Morning in the northern end, midday in the center, and afternoon in the south. This lack of coordination and concentration of McClellan's forces almost completely nullified the 2-to-1 advantage the Union enjoyed.
Right.
It also allowed Lee to shift his defensive forces to meet each offensive.
Right. Ridiculous.
This dude needs, as soon as this battle's over, I get that the Union wins, spoiler, but he needs to get the fuck... Get out of here.
The battle opened at dawn on September 17th with an attack down the Hagerstown Turnpike by the Union 1st Corps under Joseph Hooker. Hooker's objective was the plateau on which sat the Dunker Church. A modest whitewashed building belonging to a local sector of German Baptists.
Okay.
Hooker had approximately 8,600 men, little more than 7,700 defenders under Stonewall Jackson. And this slight disparity was more than offset by the Confederate strong defensive positions. So it was like having double.
Right.
Abner Doubleday's division moved on Hooker's right. James Ricketts moved on the left into the East Woods, and George Meade's Pennsylvania Reserves division deployed into the center and slightly to the rear. So the Union forces are gathering around, huh? Well, Stonewall Jackson's defense consisted of the divisions under Alexander Lawton, John R. Jones, in line from the West Woods across the Turnpike and along the southern end of Miller's cornfield. 4 brigades were held in reserve inside the West Woods. All right, we got a cornfield fighting, huh?
Right.
Nice.
As the first Union men emerged from the North Woods and into the cornfield, an artillery duel erupted. Confederate fire was from horse artillery batteries under Jeb Stuart to the west and 4 batteries under Colonel Stephen D. Lee on the high ground across the pike from the Dunker Church to the south. Union return fire was from 9 batteries on the ridge behind the North Woods and 20 20-pounder Parrott rifles 2 miles east of Antietam Creek. The conflagration caused heavy casualties on both sides and described by Colonel Lee as artillery hell. Seeing the glint of Confederate bayonets concealed in the cornfield, Hooker halted his infantry and brought up 4 batteries of artillery, which fired shell and canister over the heads of the Federal infantry into the field. Savage battle began with considerable melee action. Oh, shit, they're out there.
Shit.
Battling it out with rifle butts and bayonets due to short visibility in the corn.
You ain't kidding.
Officers rode about cursing and yelling orders no one could hear in the noise.
Hell no, they couldn't.
Rifles became hot and fouled from too much firing. The air was filled with a hail of bullets and shells. Probably smoke as well, too. Couldn't see shit. And you're in corn.
All right.
Who the hell thought it was a good idea to fight in a cornfield?
And that's the stupidest thing. Meade's 1st Brigade of Pennsylvanians, under Brigadier General Truman Seymour, began advancing through the East Woods and exchanged fire with Colonel James Walker's brigade of the Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina troops. As Walker's men forced Seymour's back, aided by Lee's artillery fire, Ricketts' division entered the cornfield, also to be torn up by the Confederate artillery. Brigadier General Abram Dury's brigade marched directly into the volleys from Colonel Marcellus Douglas's Georgia's brigade, enduring heavy fire from a range of 250 yards and gaining no advantage because of a lack of reinforcements. Dury ordered a withdrawal.
He said, we got to go, guys. The reinforcements that Dury had expected, brigades under Brigadier General George L. Hartsuff and Colonel William A. Christian, had difficulties reaching the scene. Hartsuff was wounded by a shell, and Christian dismounted and fled to the rear in terror. Oh, jeez. When the men were rallied and advanced into the cornfield, they met the same artillery and infantry fire as their predecessors. As the superior Union numbers began to tell, the Louisiana Tiger Brigade under Harry Hayes He entered the fray and forced the Union men back to the East Woods.
Okay.
Casualties received by the 12th Massachusetts Infantry, 67%, were the highest of any unit that day.
Oh.
The Tigers were beaten back eventually when the Federals brought up a battery of 3-inch ordnance rifles and rolled them directly into the cornfield. Point-blank fire that slaughtered the Tigers, who lost 323 of their 500 men.
Dang.
Yeah. Those big boys roll out. You better get out of here.
Dang. Rifles are shot to pieces in the hands of the soldiers. Canteens and haversacks are riddled with bullets. The dead and the wounded go down in scores. Captain Benjamin F. Cook of the 12th Massachusetts Infantry on the attack by the Louisiana Tigers at the cornfield, while the cornfield remained a bloody stalemate. Federal advances few hundred yards to the west were more successful. Brigadier General John Gibbons, 4th Brigade of Doubleday's Division, recently named Iron Brigade, began advancing down and astride the turnpike, into the cornfield, and into the West Woods, pushing aside Jackson's men. Just push them aside.
They're like,
Excuse me.
Get out of here.
They were halted by a charge of 1,150 men from Stark's brigade, leveling heavy fire from 30 yards away. The Confederate brigade withdrew after being exposed to fierce return fire from the Iron Brigade, and Stark was mortally wounded.
Poor Stark.
Damn.
The Union advance on the Dunkirk resumed and cut a large gap in Jackson's defensive line, which teetered near collapse. Although the cost was steep, Hooker's corps was making steady progress.
Uh-oh.
Confederate reinforcements arrived just after 7 a.m. Jeez, this is all in an hour and a half.
All right.
The divisions under McLaws and Richard H. Anderson arrived following a night march from Harper's Ferry. Around 7:15, General Lee moved George Anderson's Georgia Brigade from the right flank of the Army to aid Jackson. About 7 a.m., Hood's division of 2,300 men advanced through the West Woods and pushed the Union troops back through the cornfield again. The Texans attacked with particular ferocity. Ferocity? Ferocity? Sure. Because as they were called from their reserve position, they were forced to interrupt the first hot breakfast they had in days. They're pissed too, dude. They're all these sons of bitches.
They were aided by 3 brigades of D.H. Hill's division arriving from the Mumma Farm, southeast of the cornfield, and by Jubal Early's brigade, pushing through the West Woods from the Nicodemus Farm.
Nicodemus, huh?
Where they had been supporting Jeb Stewart's horse artillery.
Okay.
Some officers of the Iron Brigade rallied men around the artillery pieces of Battery B, 4th U.S. Artillery, and Gibbon himself saw to it that his previous unit did not lose a single caisson. Hood's men bore the brunt of the fighting, however, and paid a heavy price, 60% casualties. But they were able to prevent the defensive line from crumbling and held off the First Corps. When asked by a fellow officer where his division was, Hood replied, "Dead on the field."
Hooker's men had also paid heavily without achieving their objectives. After 2 hours and 2,500 casualties, they were back where they started. The cornfield, an area about 250 yards deep and 400 yards wide, was a scene of indescribable destruction. Jeez. It was estimated that the cornfield changed hand no fewer than 15 times in the course of the morning. Huh. Wow. Major Rufus Dawes, who assumed command of the Iron Brigade's 6th Wisconsin Regiment during the battle, later compared the fighting around the Hagerstown Turnpike with the stone wall at Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania's Bloody Angle, and the slaughter pen of Cold Harbor, insisting that the Antietam Turnpike surpassed them all in manifest evidence of slaughter.
Oh.
Hooker called for support from the 7,200 men of Mansfield's 12th Corps.
Really?
And Hooker himself says every stalk of corn in the northern and greater part of the field was cut as closely as could have been done with a knife. Huh. And the Confederates slain lay in rows precisely as they had stood in their ranks a few moments before.
Yes.
Crazy, dude.
Ain't that crazy? Half of Mansfield men were raw recruits. Mansfield was also inexperienced, having taken command only 2 days before. Although he was a veteran of 40 years' service, he had never led large numbers of soldiers in combat. Concerned that his men would bolt under fire, he marched them in formation that was known as a column of companies, closed in mass. In a bunched-up formation in which a regiment was arrayed 10 ranks deep instead of normal 2.
Oh, geez, yeah. So he's like,
yeah,
the people in front, you ain't turning around because there's all these men behind you. Good luck with that.
As his men entered the East Woods, they presented an excellent artillery target. Almost as a good target as a barn. Mansfield himself was shot in the chest and died the next day.
Oh.
Alpheus Williams assumed temporary command of the 12th Corps.
The new recruits of Mansfield's 1st Division made no progress against Hood's line, which was reinforced by brigades of D.H. Hill's division under Colquitt and McRae. 2nd Division of the 12th Corps under George Sears Green, however, broke through McRae's men, who fled under the mistaken belief that they were about to be trapped by a flanking attack.
Oh.
This breach of the line forced Hood and his men, outnumbered, to regroup in the West Woods where they had started the day, so now they're back where they began. Green was able to reach the Dunkirk Church, Hooker's original objective, and drove off Stephen Lee's batteries. Federal forces held most of the ground to the east of the turnpike. Hooker attempted to gather the scattered remnants of his first corps to continue the assault, but a Confederate sharpshooter spotted the general's conspicuous white horse and shot Hooker through the foot. Well, he's not really a sharpshooter then, is he?
Right. Shot him through the foot. Why would you have a white horse anyway?
I know. Well, Lee did.
It's true. Man, but Lee wasn't running around in the woods, though.
That's true.
Command of the First Corps fell to General Meade, since Hooker's senior subordinate, James R.B. Ricketts, had also been wounded. But with Hooker removed from the field, there was no general left with the authority to rally the men of the 1st and 12th Corps.
Why wasn't there? Where's Meade?
Greene's men came under heavy fire from the West Woods and withdrew from the Dunker Church.
Uh-oh.
In an effort to turn the Confederate left flank and relieve the pressure on Mansfield men, Sumner's 2nd Corps was ordered at 7:20 a.m. to send 2 divisions into battle. Sedgwick's division of 5,400 men was the first to ford the Antietam, and they entered the East Woods with the intention of turning left and forcing the Confederates south into the assault of Ambrose Burnside's 9th Corps. They got Burnside down south, let's push them that way. But the plan went awry, as always.
Usually does.
They became separated from William H. French's division. 9 a.m., Sumner, who was accompanying the division, launched the attack with an unusual battle formation. The 3 brigades and 3 long lines. That's stupid. Men side by side with only 50 to 70 yards separating the lines. That's pretty dumb.
That's not good. Talk about open to artillery.
Again.
They were assaulted first by Confederate artillery and then from 3 sides by the divisions of Early, Walker, and McLaws.
Damn.
And in less than a half hour, Sedgwick's men were forced to retreat in great disorder to their starting point with over 2,200 casualties, including Sedgwick himself.
That's what he gets.
Who was taken out of action for several months by a wound.
Aww.
Sumner has been condemned by Sumner has been condemned by most historians for his reckless attack, his lack of coordination with the 1st and 12th Corps headquarters, losing control of French's division when he accompanied Sedgwick's, failing to perform adequate reconnaissance prior to launching his attack, and selecting the unusual battle formation that was so effectively flanked by the Confederate counterattack.
Right.
Yeah, it seems Sumner didn't know what the hell.
I don't think any of these
All
guys.
these guys, they're like politicians, dude. They gotta like jump the gun. If I do this, I'll be courageous and I'll be commended. And
Well, a lot of these northern brigadier generals and major generals, they didn't see too much action anywhere, and most of them were like politicians.
It's true.
Man, historian M.V. Armstrong's recent scholarship has determined that Sumner did perform appropriate reconnaissance, and his decision to attack where he did was justified by the information available to him.
Was it?
The final actions in the morning phase of the battle were around 10 a.m. when 2 regiments of the 12th Corps advanced, only to be confronted by a division of John G. Walker, which was newly arriving from the Confederate right. They fought in the area between the cornfield and the West Woods. But soon Walker's men were forced back by 2 brigades of Greene's division. Look at that. And the Federal troops seized some ground in the West Woods. The morning phase ended with casualties on both sides of almost 13,000, including 2 Union Corps commanders.
Jeez. Well, by midday, the action had shifted to the center of the Confederate line. Sumner had accompanied the morning attack of Sedgwick's division, but another one of his divisions under French lost contact with Sumner and Sedgwick and inexplicably headed south. Eager for an opportunity to see combat, French found skirmishers in his path and ordered his men forward. By this time, Sumner's aide and his son, located French, described the terrible fighting in the West Woods and relayed an order for him to divert Confederate attention by attacking their center.
Okay.
French confronted D.H. Hill's division. Hill commanded about 2,500 men, less than half the number under French, and 3 of his 5 brigades had been torn up during the morning combat.
Oh, shit.
This sector of Longstreet's line was theoretically the weakest.
Okay.
But Hill's men were in a strong defensive position atop a gradual ridge and a sunken road worn down by years of wagon traffic, which formed a natural trench.
Nice.
Yep.
Worked out. Well, French launched a series of brigade-sized assaults against Hill's improvised breastworks at around 9:30 a.m. The 1st Brigade to attack, mostly inexperienced troops commanded by Brigadier General Max Weber, was quickly cut down by heavy rifle fire from the Confederates. Neither side deployed artillery at this point. The second attack, more raw recruits under Colonel Dwight Morris from the Federals, was also subjected to heavy fire, but managed to beat back a counterattack by Alabama Brigade of Robert Rhodes. The third attack, under Brigadier General Nathan Kimball, included 3 veteran regiments, but they also fell to fire from the sunken road. French's division suffered 1,750 casualties of his 5,700 men, in under an hour.
Jeez.
Reinforcements were arriving on both sides, though. And by 10:30 a.m., Robert E. Lee sent his final reserve division, some 3,400 men, under Major General Richard Anderson. He sent them to bolster Hill's line and extend it to the right, preparing an attack that would envelop French's left flank. But at the same time, 4,000 men of Major General Israel B. Richardson's division arrived on French's left.
Oh, shit. We got a showdown going on here.
Oh, damn. This was the last of Sumner's 3 divisions, which had been held up in the rear by McClellan as he organized his reserve forces. Richardson's fresh troops struck the first blow.
Yep. Leading off the fourth attack of the day against the Sunken Road was the Irish Brigade of Brigadier General Thomas F. Meagher. As they advanced with emerald green flags snapping in the breeze, a regimental chaplain, Father William Corby, rode back and forth across the front of the formation shouting words of conditional absolution prescribed by the Roman Catholic Church for those who were about to die. Oh, jeez. Corby would later perform a similar service at Gettysburg, coming up later.
Huh.
The mostly Irish immigrants lost 540 men to heavy volleys before they were ordered to withdraw. General Richardson personally dispatched the brigade of Brigadier General John C. Caldwell into battle around noon after being told that Caldwell was in the rear behind a haystack. They're just sitting there behind a haystack. And finally, the tide turned.
Uh-oh.
Anderson's Confederate division had been little help to the defenders after General Anderson was wounded early in the fighting.
Uh-oh. Other key leaders were lost as well, including George B. Anderson, no relation to the other Anderson. Colonel Charles C. Tew of the 2nd North Carolina was killed minutes after assuming command. Colonel John B. Gordon of the 6th Alabama. Gordon received 5 serious wounds in the fight, twice in his right leg, twice in the left arm, and once in the face.
Jeez.
He lay unconscious, face down in his cap, and later told colleagues that he should have smothered in his own blood, except for the fact of an unidentified Yankee who had earlier shot a hole in his cap, which allowed the blood to drain. Oh, shit. Cool.
Nice.
Rhodes was wounded in the thigh, but was still on the field. These losses contributed directly to the confusion of the following events.
Uh-oh.
We were shooting them like sheep in a pen. If a bullet missed the mark, at first it was liable to strike the further bank, angle back, and take them secondarily.
Oh, jeez. Got some ricochet in, huh?
Sergeant of the 61st New York.
Don't know who it is, but okay. As Caldwell's brigade advanced to the right flank, around the right flank of the Confederates, Colonel Francis C. Barlow and 350 men of the 61st and 64th New York, well, they saw a weak point in the line and seized a knoll commanding the Sunken Road. Was it grassy? This allowed them to get enfilade fire into the Confederate line, turning it into a deadly trap. In attempting to wheel around to meet this threat, a command from Rhodes was misunderstood by Lieutenant Colonel James N. Lightfoot, who had succeeded the unconscious John Gordon. Lightfoot ordered his men to about face and march away, an order that all 5 regiments of the brigade thought applied to them as well.
Oh, no.
Confederate troops streamed towards Sharpsburg, their line lost.
Oh, shit.
Poor communication, man.
Richardson's men were in hot pursuit when mass artillery hastily assembled by General Longstreet drove them back. A counterattack with 200 men led by D.H. Hill got around the Federal left flank near the Sunken Road. And although they were driven back by a fierce charge of the 5th New Hampshire, this stemmed the collapse of the center. Reluctantly, Richardson ordered his division to fall back to north of the ridge facing the Sunken Road. His division lost about 1,000 men. Colonel Barlow was severely wounded, Richardson mortally wounded. Winfield S. Hancock assumed division command. Although Hancock would have been an excellent future reputation as an aggressive division and corps commander, the unexpected change of command sapped the momentum of the Federal advance.
Not bad.
Of course it did.
The carnage from 9:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Sunken Road gave it the name Bloody Lane, leaving about 5,600 casualties, Union with 3,000, Confederate with 2,600, along the 800-yard road.
Jeez.
And yet, a great opportunity presented itself. If this broken sector of the Confederate line were exploited, Lee's army would be divided in half and possibly defeated. There were ample forces available to do so as well. There was a reserve of 3,500 cavalry and 10,300 infantrymen of General Porter's 5th Corps awaiting near the Middle Bridge a mile away. 6th Corps under Major General William B. Franklin had just arrived with 12,000 men. Holy shit. Franklin was ready to exploit this breakthrough, but Sumner, the senior corps commander, ordered him not to advance.
Oh, no.
You guys are idiots, man.
Franklin appealed to McClellan, who left his headquarters to the rear to hear both arguments, but backed Sumner's decision.
Of course he did, because McClellan's a bitch.
Ordering Franklin and Hancock to hold their positions. Later in the day, the commander...
He's got 167 million men over there. We can't do nothing.
Crazy.
Stupid.
Later in the day, the commander of the other reserve unit near the center, the 5th Corps, Major General John Porter, heard recommendations from Major General George Sykes, commanding the 2nd Division, that another attack would be made in the center. An idea that intrigued McClellan. He's like, maybe. However, Porter is said to have told McClellan, "Remember, General, I command the last reserve of the last army of the Republic." McClellan demurred, and another opportunity was lost.
Oh, Porter pulled rank, huh? He's like, don't think so.
McClellan was like, I wasn't going to do it anyway.
Right. Oh, the action moved to the southern end of the battlefield now. McClellan's plan called for Major General Ambrose Burnside and the 9th Corps to conduct a diversionary attack in support of Hooker's 1st Corps, hoping to draw Confederate attention away from the intended main attack in the north. However, Burnside was instructed to wait for explicit orders before launching his attack, and those orders did not reach him until 10 a.m.
Oh, jeez.
Burnside was strangely passive during preparations for the battle. He was disgruntled that McClellan had abandoned the previous arrangement of wing commanders reporting to him.
Right.
Previously, Burnside had commanded a wing that included both the 1st and 9th Corps, and now he was responsible only for the 9th Corps.
Oh, jeez.
Implicitly refusing to give up his higher authority, Burnside treated 1st Major General Jesse L. Reno, who was killed at South Mountain, and then Brigadier General Jacob D. Cox of the Kanawha Division as the Corps commander, funneling orders to the Corps through him.
Oh.
So Burnside's being a little bitch now, huh?
Yeah, he's passed. Burnside had 4 divisions, which accompanied 12,500 troops, 50 guns east of Antietam Creek. Facing him was a force that had been greatly depleted by Lee's movement of units to bolster the Confederate left flank. At dawn, divisions of Brigadier Generals David Jones and John G. Walker stood in defense, but by 10 a.m., all of Walker's men and Colonel George T. Anderson's Georgia Brigade had been removed.
Bye.
Jones had about 3,000 men, 12 guns available to meet Burnside. 4 thin brigades guarded the ridges near Sharpsburg, primarily a low plateau known as Cemetery Hill. The remaining 400 men, the 2nd and 20th Georgia regiments, were under the command of Brigadier General Robert Toombs, with 2 artillery batteries, defended Rohrbark's Bridge, a 3-span 125-foot stone structure that was the southernmost crossing of the Antietam structure. I mean, it's a bridge. Let's call it a bridge.
It would become known to history as Burnside's Bridge because of the notoriety of the coming battle. The bridge was a difficult objective. The road leading to it ran parallel to the creek and was exposed to enemy fire. The bridge was dominated by a 100-foot-high wooded bluff on the west bank, strewn with boulders from an old quarry, making infantry and sharpshooter fire from good covered positions a dangerous impediment to crossing.
Yeah. All right.
Go and look at the bridge and tell me if you don't think Burnside and his corps might have executed a hop, skip, and a jump and landed on the other side. One thing is certain, they might have waited it that day without getting their waist belts wet in any place. So said Confederate Staff Officer Henry Kidd Douglas.
Antietam Creek in this sector was seldom more than 50 feet wide. Several stretches were only waist deep and out of Confederate range.
Okay.
Burnside has been widely criticized for ignoring this
Okay,
fact.
Burnside's an idiot.
However, the commanding terrain across the sometimes shallow creek made crossing the water a comparatively easy part of a difficult problem. Burnside concentrated his plan instead on storming the bridge while simultaneously crossing a ford McClellan's engineers had identified a half a mile downstream. But when Burnside's men reached it, they found the banks too high to negotiate. Well, Colonel George Crooks.
So why did McClellan's engineers say that this was a good ford then?
Idiots. While Colonel George Crook's Ohio Brigade prepared to attack the bridge with the support of Brigadier General Samuel Sturgis's division, the rest of the Kanawha Division and Brigadier General Isaac Rodman's division struggled through thick brush trying to locate Snavely's Ford 2 miles downstream, intending to flank the Confederates. Jeez.
Well, Crook's assault on the bridge was led by skirmishers from the 11th Connecticut who were ordered to clear the bridge for the Ohioans to cross and assault the bluff. After receiving punishing fire for 15 minutes, the Connecticut men withdrew with 139 casualties, 1/3 of their strength, including their commander, Colonel Henry W. Kingsbury, who was fatally wounded.
Oh, poor guy.
Crook's main assault went awry when his unfamiliarity with the terrain caused his men to reach the creek a quarter mile upstream from the bridge.
Okay.
Where they exchanged volleys with Confederate skirmishers for the next few hours.
Fantastic.
While Rodman's division was out of touch, slogging towards Snavely's Ford, Burnside and Cox directed a second assault at the bridge by one of Sturgis's brigades, led by the 2nd Maryland and 6th New Hampshire.
Okay.
They also fell prey to the Confederate sharpshooters and artillery, and their attack fell apart. By this time, it was noon, and McClellan was losing patience, and he was hungry. He sent a succession of couriers to motivate Burnside to move forward. He ordered one aide, tell him if it costs 10,000 men, he must go now. Screw you, McClellan.
Jeez.
He increased the pressure by sending his Inspector General, Colonel Delos B. Sackett, to confront Burnside, who reacted indignantly. McClellan appears to think I'm not trying my best to carry this bridge. You are the third or fourth one who's been to me this morning with similar orders. I know what the fuck I got to do. Okay?
Right. Jeez, OP.
Hell out of here.
Third attempt to take bridge is 12:30 p.m. by Sturgis's other brigade, commanded by Brigadier General Edward Ferrero. It was led by the 51st New York and 51st Pennsylvania, who, with adequate artillery support and a promise that a recently canceled whiskey ration would be restored if they were successful.
They're like, they want to get that damn whiskey.
Yeah. Charged downhill and took up positions on the east bank. Maneuvering a captured light howitzer into position, they fired double canister down the bridge and got within 25 yards of the enemy. By 1 p.m., Confederate ammunition was running low, and word reached Toombs that Rodman's men were crossing Snavely's Ford on their flank. He ordered a withdrawal. His Georgians had cost the Federals more than 500 casualties, giving up fewer than 160 themselves. So that was pretty good. And they had stalled Burnside's assault on the southern flank for more than 3 hours.
Damn.
Well, they did what they're supposed to do.
Burnside's assault stalled again on its own. His officers had neglected to transport ammunition across the bridge, which itself was becoming a bottleneck for soldiers, artillery, and wagons.
Right.
This represented another 2-hour delay. Jeez. General Lee used this time to bolster his right flank. I bet he did. He ordered up every available artillery unit, although he made no attempt to strengthen D.R. Jones's badly outnumbered force with infantry units from the left.
He's like, what about D.R. Jones?
Nah. Instead, he counted on the arrival of A.P. Hill's Light Division, currently embarked on an exhausting 17-mile march from Harper's Ferry. By 2 p.m., Hill's men had reached Bottler's Ford, and Hill was able to confer with the relieved Lee at 2:30.
Okay.
Who ordered him to bring up his men to the right of Jones. Oh, there you go, Jones. Federals are completely unaware that 3,000 new men would be facing them.
Uh-oh. Burnside's plan was to move around the weakened Confederate right flank, converge on Sharpsburg, and cut Lee's army off from Bottler's Ford. Their only escape route across the Potomac.
Yep.
3 p.m., Burnside left Sturgis' division in reserve on the west bank and moved west with over 8,000 troops, most of them fresh. He had 22 guns for close support as well. Initial assault led by the 79th New York Cameron Highlanders succeeded against Jones's outnumbered division, which was pushed back past Cemetery Hill to within 200 yards of Sharpsburg. Farther to the Union left, Rodman's division advanced toward Harper's Ferry Road. Its lead brigade, under Colonel Harrison Fairchild, containing several colorful zouaves of the New York 9th, commanded by Colonel Rush Hawkins, came under heavy shell fire from a dozen enemy guns mounted on a ridge to their front. But they kept on trucking.
Kept on moving on.
There was panic in the streets of Sharpsburg, clogged with retreating Confederates. Of the 5 brigades in Jones' division, only Toombs' brigade was still intact. We only had 700 men.
I don't think that's very much intact.
I don't think so.
A.P. Hill's division arrived finally at about 3:30 p.m. He divided his column with 2 brigades moving southeast to guard his flank, and the other 3, about 2,000 men, moving to the right of Toombs' brigade and preparing for a counterattack.
All right.
About 3:40, Brigadier General Maxcy Greggs' brigade of South Carolinians attacked the 16th Connecticut, which was on Rodman's left flank in the cornfield of Farmer John Otto.
Hey.
The Connecticut men had been in service for only 3 weeks, and their line disintegrated with 185 casualties.
Wow.
The 4th Rhode Island came up on the right, but they had poor visibility amid the high stalks of corn.
Of course.
And they were disoriented because the many Confederates were wearing Union uniforms captured at Harper's Ferry, right?
Yeah.
Remember they said they'd be causing confusion there.
That's funny.
They also broke and ran, leaving the 8th Connecticut far out in advance and isolated. Jeez. They were enveloped and driven down They enveloped and driven down the hills toward Antietam Creek. A counterattack by regiments from the Kanawha Division fell short.
And what are you going to do, man? You tried. The 9th Corps had suffered casualties of about 20%, but still possessed twice the number of Confederates confronting them.
Right.
Unnerved by the collapse of his flank, Burnside ordered his men all the way back to the west bank of the Antietam, where he urgently requested more men and guns. McClellan was able to provide just 1 battery. He said, I can do nothing more. I have no infantry. In fact, however, McClellan had 2 fresh corps in reserves.
Dude,
oh, my goodness.
Gosh, man.
Porter's 5th and Franklin's 6th. But he was too cautious.
Oh, no way. McClellan too cautious?
He was very concerned that he was greatly outnumbered.
Oh, my God.
And that a massive counterstrike by Lee was imminent.
This dude is just... how does he lead an army when he's too scared to do any fucking thing?
It's like he's terrified of Lee. It's like, what the hell? Burnside's men spent the rest of the day guarding the bridge they had suffered so much to capture.
The battle was over by 5:30 p.m. On the morning of September 18th, Lee's army prepared to defend against a federal assault that never came. Of course it didn't. Because why attack the enemy when they're on their heels?
Right.
After an improvised truce for both sides to recover and exchange their wounded, Lee's forces began withdrawing across the Potomac that evening to return to Virginia. Losses from the battle were heavy on both sides. Union had 12,410 casualties with 2,108 dead. Confederate casualties were 10,316 with 1,547 dead. This represents 25% of the Federal force and 31% of the Confederates.
Jeez.
Overall, both sides lost a combined total of 22,726 in a single day, almost the same amount as the number of losses that had shocked the nation at the two-day Battle of Shiloh just 5 months prior.
Jeez, oh, Pete. Of the other casualties, 1,910 Union and 1,550 Confederate troops died of their wounds soon after the battle.
Jeez. While
225 Union and 306 Confederate troops listed as missing were later confirmed as dead. Several generals died as a result of the battle, including Major Generals Joseph K. Mansfield, Israel B. Richardson, and Brigadier General Isaac P. Rodman of the Unions, and Brigadier General Lawrence O. Branch and William E. Stark on the Confederates. Confederate Brigadier General George B. Anderson was shot in the ankle during the defense of the Bloody Lane. He survived the battle, but died later in October of an amputation.
Oh, no, they had to amputate his foot, and then he died because of that. Wow. So he's technically a casualty of the battle.
The fighting on September 17th, 1862, killed 7,650 American soldiers.
That's stupid.
More Americans died in battle on September 17th, 1862 than on any other day in the nation's history. Antietam is sometimes cited as the bloodiest day in all of American history. Antietam ranks 5th in terms of total casualties in Civil War battles, falling behind Gettysburg, Chickamauga, Chancellorsville, and Spotsylvania Courthouse.
We haven't even done any of those yet, so maybe we've done Chancellorsville, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's the 5th of battles, but Gettysburg was a 3-day battle. I'm sure these were all more than...
I think Gettysburg was the bloodiest 3 days.
The bloodiest battle of all.
What?
Gettysburg, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Or was that Shiloh?
No, I think Gettysburg gets that, bud.
Well, President Lincoln was disappointed in McClellan's performance, as are we. He believed McClellan's overly cautious and poorly coordinated actions in the field had forced the battle to a draw rather than a crippling Confederate defeat, I think.
Should have been.
The president was even more astonished that from September 17th to October 26th, despite repeated entreaties from the War Department and the president himself, McClellan declined to pursue Lee across the Potomac. He's getting direct orders from the president, who is the commander-in-chief, and he's saying, no, He cites shortage of equipment and the fear of overextending his forces.
No, he was scared.
You're scared of Lee, you put.
Yeah, he was like, you got 100,000 men over there.
His general-in-chief, Henry Halleck, this guy does nothing too. Get rid of Halleck.
Yeah, Halleck.
Wrote in his official report, the long inactivity of so large an army in the face of a defeated foe when during the most favorable season for rapid movements and a vigorous campaign was a matter of great disappointment and regret.
Right. They could easily.
Well, Lincoln relieved McClellan of his command of the Army of Potomac on November 5th, way too long, effectively ending the general's military career. He was replaced on November 9th by General Burnside.
Yeah, Burnside is like, yeah. Casualties were comparable on both sides. Although Lee had lost a higher percentage of his army, Lee withdrew from the battlefield first, the technical definition of the tactical loser in a Civil War battle.
You can't relinquish the battlefield, bud.
However, in a strategic sense, despite being a tactical draw, Antietam is considered a turning point of the war and a victory for the Union because it ended Lee's strategic campaign.
Yeah.
American historian James B.
Which was his first invasion of the Union territory, right?
Right. American historian James M. McPherson summed up the importance of the battle in his book, Crossroads of Freedom. He says,
frogs are gay.
He says, no other campaign and battle in the war had such momentous, multiple consequences as Antietam. In July of 1863, the dual Union triumphs at Gettysburg and Vicksburg struck another blow that blunted a renewed Confederate offensive in the east and cut off the western third of the Confederacy from the rest.
Yeah, we'll be getting to that pretty soon. November 1864, Sherman's capture of Atlanta electrified the North, set the stage for the final drive to the Union victory. Those also were pivotal moments, but they would never have happened if the Triple Confederate Offensive in Mississippi, Kentucky, and most of all Maryland had not been defeated in the fall of 1862.
Right.
The results of Antietam also allowed President Lincoln to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. He was not going to do it until they won this battle, dude.
Yeah.
On September 22nd, which gave the Confederate States until January 1st, 1863 to end the rebellion or else lose their slaves. Although Lincoln had intended to do so earlier, Secretary of State William Seward at a cabinet meeting advised him to wait until the Union won a significant victory as to not appear that he was doing it out of desperation. So, which it would have, because they were getting their asses whooped prior to this battle.
They were. The Union victory in Lincoln's proclamation played a considerable role in dissuading the governments of France and Britain from recognizing the Confederacy. Some suspected they were planning to do so in the aftermaths of another Union defeat. When emancipation was linked to the progress of the war, neither government had the political will to oppose the United States.
Right. When they're saying now these guys got to free the slaves, and now Britain and France are now going to look like they support slavery.
Yeah. They're like, I don't know.
Can't do that. That's a political nightmare.
Both countries had already abolished slavery, and the public would not have tolerated the government military supporting a sovereignty upholding the ideals of slaves.
Right.
They're like, excuse us?
What? The battle is commemorated at Antietam National Battlefield, well, of course.
Yeah,
Conservation work undertaken by Antietam National Battlefield and private groups has earned Antietam a reputation as one of the nation's best preserved battlefields of the Civil War.
Go check that out.
Few visual intrusions mar the landscape, letting visitors experience the site nearly as it was in 1862. That'd be cool. Antietam was one of the first 5 Civil War battlefields preserved federally, receiving that distinction August 30th, 1890.
Nice.
The U.S. War Department also placed over 300 tablets at that time to mark the spots of individual regiments and of significant phases in the battle. Oh, I wonder if those are still there.
Bet.
Battlefield was transferred to the Department of Interior in 1933. The Antietam National Battlefield now consists of 2,743 acres.
Wow. The American Battle Trust and its partners have acquired and preserved 464 acres of the Antietam battlefield as of late 2021. 2015, the trust saved 44.4 acres in the heart of the battlefield between the cornfield and the Duncan Church when it purchased the Wilson Farm for about $1 million. That is it.
Wow.
The Preservation Organization has since removed the post-war house and barn that stood on the... Why would you do that? They removed the house and barn that stood on the property along Hagerstown Pike and returned the land...
Post-war.
To its... Oh, okay, post-war. Okay, and return it back to its wartime appearance.
Right.
Fantastic.
Get this shit out of here.
Yeah, I like that. Sorry.
September 19th, 1862, 2 days after the battle, Matthew Brady sent photographer Alexander Gardner and his assistant James Gibson to photograph the carnage.
Oh, man.
October 1862, Brady displayed the photos by Gardner in an exhibition entitled The Dead of Antietam at Brady's New York Gallery. Ooh. It's probably one of the first times that people are seeing graphic pictures.
Right.
Many images in this presentation were graphic photographs of corpses, a presentation new to America. Yeah. This was the first time that many Americans saw the realities of war in photographs as distinct from previous artists' impressions. Right. Because previous was only paintings. The New York Times published a review on October 20th, 1862, describing how, of all objects of horror, one would think the battlefield should stand preeminent, that it should bear away the palm of repulsiveness.
Oh.
But crowds came to the gallery drawn by a terrible fascination to the images of mangled corpses, which brought the reality of remote battlefields to New Yorkers. Can you believe that shit?
Right.
Viewers examined details using a magnifying glass.
Oh, my.
We would scarce choose to be in the gallery when one of the women bending over them should recognize a husband, a son, or a brother in the still lifeless lines of bodies that lie ready for the gaping trenches.
Jeez.
Crazy stuff.
Wow.
See, the Civil War... And these pictures kind of did how the Vietnam War did so that was the first war that you actually had real news coverage of war.
Right.
And people are like, holy shit, war is fucking
crazy.
War is not good.
I'm telling you, watch that movie, The Greatest Beer Run Ever or some shit. What's his face? Zac Efron. Good movie. And it shows the actual, what we're talking about. First time shit like this was filmed.
And that shall do it for Antietam, folks.
Crazy battle.
It was just like nonstop.
Man.
The whole day. And McClellan, again, shows his ignorance. And Lee really couldn't do anything but defense. He tried to attack, but it didn't really happen for him.
No.
Coming up next, we got the Battle of Shepherdstown in West Virginia, and then the Battle of Iuka, Mississippi, Battle of Wood Lake in Minnesota. We got some Minnesota action. And maybe even the first Battle of Sabine Pass in Texas. All of those are Class C battles. We don't have another significant battle until maybe the Second Battle of Corinth. But then we have the Battle of Perryville in Kentucky coming up in October. That's pretty much it. Fredericksburg's coming up. And then Stone River's Second Battle of Murfreesboro to end the year. And it looks to me like the Union, well, no, Confederates get a little
push.
Well, they go back and forth pretty much. But, yep, that'll do it for us. We'll be back next week for that. Go check out, in the meantime, Outlaws and Gunslingers, where this week you're probably going to hear the Boston Marathon bombings and the backstory on those douchebags and obviously the manhunt and where the kid runs over his own brother in the middle of the street and then hides out in a boat and all that good stuff in between. And then go check out This Week in Sports History, where we're covering everything in sports history, obviously. If you guys want this show ad-free, because this is probably going to be a long one, and you probably heard about 30 ads by now, go to patreon.com/bangdang, $2 a month. You get this show, Outlaws and Gunslingers, Sports History, plus any bonus shows that we do over there, $2 a month, and all ad-free. And that's probably the preferable way of listening. Who wants a bunch of ads, right?
Right.
If not, listen to the ads, because either way, you'll support us. So, patreon.com/bangdang, back next week. A couple battles more, and we continue on the saga of the American Civil War.
The saga.
We are the Month Michiganders with
Bang Dang.